1 through 16. I've got my predicted order of finish for SEC football in 2024. It's locked on LSU. Let's get it.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked On LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen every single day. We are free, available wherever you get great podcasts, and of course on YouTube as well. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am excited to recap SEC football media days. Excited to be back home. I will give you my predicted order of finish for the SEC, and we're going to start with some really interesting financials. How much exactly is LSU football going to be paying its roster? We'll get to that in a second. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So Brian Kelly gave an interview with Ross Dellinger of Yahoo. Of course, Ross Dellinger, formerly of The Advocate. And I'm not going to go into all the details, but if you listen to the show, if you've listened to anything that I've done over the course of the years, you know I am very interested in the business of sports. Now, please don't run away. If all you want to hear is X's and O's, and I understand that, I respect it very much, please at least indulge me for a brief moment. Yes, college football and college sports is made up of the haves and the have-nots. And I do understand that the average and casual fan does not care deeply about the business side of sports. But my contention has always been that you better care about it, because there is only a small number of teams that can actually win at the highest level of college sports. Those are the haves. And all of this that's going on right now around college athletics is only further exacerbating what's happening there, and the divide between the haves and the have-nots. And if you want to be a have, you have to be able to pay coaches. You have to be able to build facilities. You have to have a recruiting budget. Now you have to have NIL. All of that matters very, very much. And in an NIL world that's evolving constantly. Well, I'm not going to bore you with everything. Just understand there was a big settlement by the NCAA and the players, and what that's going to lead to is revenue share. And so schools, athletic departments are going to have to decide how much revenue they're going to share with their student athletes and how they divvy that up. I don't want to make your head hurt. I'm not a numbers guy either. I promise. I'm just going to boil this down for you. Brian Kelly spoke to Ross Dellinger and said the plan starting in 2025, when schools can share up to 20% of their revenue with their student athletes, is that LSU for football is likely going to share between $14 and $17 million with their student athletes in football. Now, keep in mind, LSU athletics generates like $200 million in revenue. So effectively what they're saying is about 14 to 17 million of that roughly 200 million is going to go to the football team. Again, that's a best guess. It's not set in stone. But I just want to explain a few things and probably explain a few misconceptions. Number one, that is not NIL. That's completely separate. Remember, NIL funds are raised through the collective or true NIL deals that are done with student athletes. This is revenue that the athletic department and the football program generates. These are not fundraisers. This isn't TAF going out and raising money or Bayou Traditions going out and raising money. This is the revenue that comes into the athletic department. Also, this is not state funds. So this isn't you, the taxpayer, subsidizing LSU athletics. This is LSU athletics existing as an entity, right? And having ticket sales and concessions and parking and the revenue share that it gets being a member of the Southeastern Conference from the TV deals and sharing in the college football playoff revenue in all the different ways, tradition fund, all the different ways that the athletic department raises money, okay? All that is one big pile, and a portion of that starting in 2025 is going to be shared with the student athletes. That is a true revenue share. Now, my contention has been and will continue to be that's going to create a lot of problems, because you're going to have to find yes, your revenues will go up, but if you're all of a sudden taking $14 to $17 million and handing it to your athletes, well, LSU doesn't have a giant surplus every year. It's not like they generate $200 million in revenue and they spend $120 and have an $80 million surplus. That's not how it works. LSU essentially generates $200 million in revenue and they spend it all. So where are you going to cut $14 to $17 million annually in your budget? I don't have the answer, by the way. I don't know what it is. Is it staff? Are you going to cut coaches' salaries? Are you eventually going to cut some sports altogether? Maybe. I don't know. But for the first time, Brian Kelly on the record gave us some definitive number as far as at least a gauge of what LSU is looking to be able to spend for its football players. Now, the other thing that's very interesting is what that may mean for NIL. Keep in mind, $14 to $17 million for the football roster sounds huge, doesn't it? But keep in mind, you have 85 scholarship players. Let's just conservatively say it's on the low end, it's $14 million. If you share $14 million evenly among 85 scholarship players, that comes out to $165,000 roughly per player. It's a great year for a college student, for anybody. But when you see some of the deals these guys are getting through NIL, through the collective, some of them are getting a lot more than $165K. And the other thing, too, is part of that settlement, we may ultimately see college football rosters expand from 85 to 110 scholarship players. That's one of the theories out there. So, again, you can understand if that's the size of the pie and now you're cutting it 110 ways instead of 85 ways, the value per athlete goes down. So, look, collectives aren't going anywhere. You're still going to have to fundraise. I think from the coaches and administrator standpoint, the hope is that something like this revenue share will basically cool NIL. Now, so you get your revenue share, and then maybe you could supplement with NIL deals, but really the chunk of it would be through revenue share. I don't know if that's doable. The other thing that's worth keeping an eye on as well, and I think most people are in favor of this, and it's what they kind of refer to as true NIL, meaning what NIL was supposed to be. You're a student athlete in Baton Rouge and you want to do an NIL deal with a restaurant, and they pay you fair market value for that endorsement. That's true NIL, for your name, image, and likeness. What we have now is pay for play, as we all well know. I don't know how you ever get there, but that might be part of the settlement between the NCAA and the athletes. We'll see ultimately what may come of that. But again, Brian Kelly effectively saying for the first time a number that we can kind of wrap our heads around of what LSU is likely going to be spending starting in 2025 on its football roster, somewhere in the neighborhood of $14 to $17 million. It's good to be a college athlete in these days. It's about time. I know a lot of you disagree with me, but by now you should know how I feel about it. Okay, it is Locked on LSU. We're glad to have you aboard with us. I'm back home and really, really, really glad to be back home. But it was a great time at SEC Football Media Days. 4 days of binging on college football and talking about it from every angle. Well, part of our duty every year is putting together our preseason all SEC ballots and our predicted order of finish. I won't bore you with my all SEC ballot, but when we return, I will share with you 1 to 16 my predicted order of finish so you can all bookmark it and laugh at me later. Thrilled to be able to share today with you about our friends over at Game Time. Man, I love Major League Baseball. As a matter of fact, maybe a week from Monday, I might actually be over in Houston watching the Pirates and Paul Skeens against the Astros and Alex Bregman. If you want to get over there as well, you got to download the Game Time app. You got to do it. Game Time, they're an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. It's so easy if you haven't done it yet to download that Game Time app. So you take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. By the way, Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat on your phone before you buy. They have all-in pricing, so it shows you the total cost up front. It's not like once you click the button, now the price is going to double because of fees or whatever it may be. You can buy your tickets in just seconds with 2 taps on your phone. So many ways to save money. I love this as well. If you find tickets, it's the game time guarantee. If you find tickets, same section, same row, for less than you paid, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference automatically. It's Game Time. I'm telling you, do it right now. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem with the code LOCKEDONCollege. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Download the Game Time app today. So, back home from SEC football media days, and I figured, okay, let's do it. I am nothing if not transparent, and we are, it is our duty when we go to SEC media days to put together our predicted order of finish. And I am looking at my ballot right now, 1 to 16, how I voted the league would finish. Now, I would like to throw out this caveat that I do feel like I reserve the right to change my mind at some point if there's injuries or something significant happens before the start of the season. But go ahead and bookmark this. You can all come back and laugh at me later if I'm dead wrong. Some of this is not going to surprise you, but I'll run through why I did. I want to be very clear about this as well. I know a lot of times people sort of melt over these all-conference teams and the order of finish and all that stuff, what the media does. I did this in the airport on the way home on Thursday with not a ton of research, really with no research at hand. I was just doing it off memory and from what I kind of am convicted about here heading into this season. So here we go. I don't think at the top it's going to surprise anyone. I have Georgia at the top and Georgia winning the SEC. Shocker, I know. And I have Texas finishing second. I don't think this should be a surprise as well, but look at Texas's league schedule. Mississippi State at home, neutral site against Oklahoma. They do get Georgia, but it's at home. At Vandy, home against Florida, at Arkansas, Kentucky, at Texas A&M. The road conference games for Texas are at Vandy, at Arkansas, Texas A&M. They also get Florida and Kentucky mixed in there. I think if Texas is not a playoff team, if they're not playing Georgia in the SEC championship game, something went horribly, horribly wrong for Steve Sarkisian and the Texas Longhorns. Number 3, I've got Ole Miss, and you can roll your eyes at me all you want, but it's all about the schedule. They returned a ton from a really good team a year ago. They added through the transfer portal, and look at this schedule. Kentucky, here's your league schedule. Kentucky at South Carolina, at LSU, Oklahoma, at Arkansas, Georgia, but at home, at Florida, and then the Egg Bowl at home. Road conference games at South Carolina, at LSU, back-to-back. That's tough. They get at Arkansas and at Florida. I'm not saying those are easy, but I think Ole Miss as a 10-win team is very, very doable if they're able to avoid the landmines. After Ole Miss 3, I've got Missouri 4. I don't mean to upset you LSU fans, but again, you're going to sense a theme. Whenever I am predicting a season, I always look at who has the fewest questions against the most manageable schedule. And yes, Missouri has some questions. You lose an all-SEC running back. You lose your defensive coordinator in Blake Baker. You lose a couple of studs on the defensive line and in the secondary. But again, look at the schedule. Their hardest game by far is at Alabama. They get Vandy, at A&M, Auburn, at Bama, Oklahoma at home, at South Carolina, at Mississippi State, Arkansas. You avoid Georgia. You avoid Texas. You avoid Ole Miss. You avoid LSU. Missouri got a real sweetheart of a schedule, and I think I've got Missouri 4 because of that. I got LSU 5, Tennessee 6, Alabama 7. If I have one big hot take of the coming out of media days, and I've shared this with you before, I think for the first time since 2010, Alabama loses 3 games in the regular season. In fact, in his entire time at Alabama after 2007, that first year, that was the only season Nick Saban ever lost 3 games total. Regular season, postseason combined was that 2010 season. I think Alabama loses 3 games in 2024, and I think they lose on the road at LSU and at Tennessee, which is why I have LSU, Tennessee, Bama in that order, 5, 6, 7. Texas A&M, I have 8th. And I think A&M is a really intriguing team because they do have Connor Wigman back, and there's a lot of people high on him. I mean, he's in a lot of mock drafts as a first-round pick. And while they lost, they suffered a lot of attrition. I think that hurts their depth, but I think their starters still could be very good. How quickly does Mike Elko change the culture? I think it's very comparable to when Brian Kelly took over the LSU job. Very stabilizing force. How good can Mike Elko get them year one? I still look at this as a really difficult schedule for A&M with a lot of questions. They do have to play at Mississippi State, at South Carolina. They're at Auburn. They get Texas at home. They get LSU at home. They're at Florida as well early in the season. You know, they go Notre Dame, McNeese at Florida. If they stub their toe at home against Notre Dame and lose in the Swamp, you could start 1-2, and that thing could maybe unravel a little bit on them. But A&M, I have 8. So that's my first half of the league. Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss, Missouri, LSU, Tennessee, Bama, A&M. That's my first 8. I am going to be very candid here. I'm not super bullish on how I have this organized the rest of the way. I've got Auburn 9 because I think while they have this brutal stretch in 3 consecutive weeks, now they have a bye in the middle, but they go at Georgia, open date, at Missouri, at Kentucky. That's a really tough stretch. And they have to go at Alabama. So Auburn is at Georgia and at Alabama. Be careful what you wish for. You want to play them games every year, this is what you're going to get. And so for that reason, they find themselves in the bottom half of my projected order finish. But I want to remind you, a year ago, when Auburn won 6 games, historic loss against New Mexico State, a game they had no business losing. And they were 4th and 31, a stop on 4th and 31 away from beating Alabama. If you show up against New Mexico State and stop Bama on 4th and 31, that's an 8-4 football team with a win over Bama. So I don't think Auburn was far away last year. You give Hugh Freeze another year, nobody's talking about Auburn at all. Jarquez Hunter's a really good running back. Peyton Thorne's back at quarterback. I think Auburn may be the team that surprises some people this year, and it wouldn't stun me if they found a way to 8-4 this year. I've got Oklahoma 10th. Again, I think Oklahoma could be a good team, but it's just the schedule, something we've talked about plenty. I've got Florida 11, Kentucky 12, and I might have flip-flopped those except for the fact that Florida gets that Kentucky game at home. I think both those teams could finish 6-6 this year, but if Florida gets to 7-5, I think it includes a win at home against Kentucky, which is why I have Florida 11, Kentucky 12, followed by South Carolina, Mississippi State, Arkansas, and Vanderbilt. I think those bottom 4 are really going to struggle. Jeff Lebby going into Mississippi State this year with Blake Shapen as his quarterback. He's just got they'll be fun offensively. He's a really good offensive mind. He's just going to have to get players there. Arkansas, I don't really have much confidence at all in Sam Pittman. The offensive line was atrocious a year ago. KJ Jefferson's now at Central Florida. Taylor Green, the Boise State transfer, is the new quarterback. I just don't know that Arkansas is going to be any good at all, and I think Sam Pittman is ultimately not going to be back next year. And then Vanderbilt, exactly where they belong, bringing up the rear. So there you have it. That's my projected order of finish. Bookmark it. If I'm dead wrong, you can laugh at me, but I'll run through it again. Georgia. Okay, forgive me. We had a little bit of a disconnection there. So let me just run through my final 16 again. Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss, Missouri, LSU, Tennessee, Bama, A&M. That's my top 8. Followed by Auburn, Oklahoma, Florida, Kentucky, and the bottom 4, South Carolina, Mississippi State, Arkansas, and Vanderbilt. Feel free to bookmark it, write it down, and mock me mercilessly when I'm wrong. Hey, before we wrap up this episode of Locked on LSU, your team every day, I'm not sure if you noticed, but it kind of fitting that the day after LSU lands 5-star cornerback DJ Pickett, a crown jewel for Corey Raymond and DBU, Robert Steeples, LSU's former cornerbacks coach, has a new job. Robert Steeples, who played defensive back, who after his career was over, was a high school coach, then was an NFL assistant coach for a year with the Minnesota Vikings, and then went straight from his high school coaching days to one season with the Vikings as an assistant special teams coach to LSU's cornerbacks coach for 2 seasons. I mean, that is an almost unfathomable jump when your first collegiate job is the cornerback's job at LSU. And clearly he failed miserably. Robert Steeples is now an offensive analyst at Iowa State. He went from special teams assistant in the NFL for 1 year to LSU cornerbacks coach, where he failed miserably, and now offensive analyst at Iowa State. I think Brian Kelly's done a lot right since he's got the LSU job. His biggest mistake, and we talk about some of them personnel-wise. He let Blake Baker go. He let Greg McMahon, the special teams coordinator, go. Didn't retain Tommy Moffitt. We talk about a lot of things. Maybe didn't focus on Louisiana recruiting as much as he should have. The top of the list was not retaining Corey Raymond and hiring Robert Steeples. I wish Robert Steeples nothing but success. Seems like an awesome guy, and I hope he has a fantastic career ahead of him. But the last 24 hours illustrates very clearly how big of a swing and miss that was for Brian Kelly. Before I wrap it up today, just to put a button on SEC Football Media Days, 4 days. They're at the Dallas Omni. 16 coaches, 48 players came through. We had a chance to bring you a ton of that content, both on my radio show After Further Review and here on Locked on LSU. And if I had my big overarching takeaways, I think Georgia is boring. Their greatness has become boring. And it's almost at the level where I was with Alabama, where it doesn't matter what coaches they lose, what players they lose. You just assume whoever is next in the pipeline is going to be just as great and maintain that standard. I'll be fascinated to see if Kirby Smart is long for college football. There's always been a lot of talk about him potentially jumping to the NFL, especially in this portal NIL culture. That would certainly shake things up, and nothing is ever a given. Look at Clemson. I mean, we thought for that, 3 to 5 year run that when Clemson was challenging Alabama, that Clemson could be the team to dethrone Alabama. And clearly they have fallen off. They did not evolve in the times of the portal and NIL, and you've seen that program regress. What happens with Georgia? The new schools, it's so interesting. Oklahoma, over the last 20 years, has by far been the more dominant program than Texas. But Texas comes in off of a playoff appearance and with a great quarterback and a lot of expectation of being right back there. And boy, that's their expectation. It will be surely interesting to see if Texas finds itself dodging landmines in the SEC throughout this season. They went to Tuscaloosa and won last year, whipped Alabama a year ago. I don't think they're scared. Are they durable enough to hold up through an 8-game SEC schedule where there is no stretch of Kansas, Iowa State, and TCU? We'll see, I guess, in relative short order. LSU's talking points at SEC Media Days, exactly what you expected them to be. Can you fix the defense? Is Brian Kelly ready in year 3 to break through that 9-3? Told you I got LSU picked 5th in the SEC, not a playoff team. Hopefully they surprise me and find a way to kick that door through. I just don't know that I see more than 3 SEC teams getting in, but that's the fun thing about the growing sample size is we'll all sit here and watch football for 4 and 5 months, binge on it, and then we'll see what the committee elects to do when we get toward December. So those are my takeaways from SEC Football Media Days. Maybe a little higher on Auburn that nobody's actually talking about. I do think this is Sam Pittman's last year at Arkansas. My buddy John Neighbors from Locked on Razorbacks, by the way, made sort of an odd prediction. Said he thinks Sam Pittman actually doesn't get fired, that he retires after this season, retires from coaching, which is something certainly worth watching. All right, that's going to do it for us here on this edition of Locked on LSU. Do us a solid. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're there on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever a video posts. And be sure to tell a friend if they love the Tigers. We got you here every single day for Locked on LSU, your team every day.